Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 70th edition of the Winter Show. We're thrilled to have you with us today. We're delighted to be partnering with our friends of Master Drawings Week and the Drawing Foundation to present this panel discussion on the market for drawings. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Allison, who's going to introduce.
Hi, everyone. Hey. So my name's Allison Wisher. Oh, thank you. I'm the co-founder of the Drawing Foundation, and I'm here today to introduce the panel. We're so excited to be working with Helen at the Winter Show, and thank you so much for having us in this beautiful space. It's wonderful to be here, and in the past, Master Drawings New York kind of coincides with the same week as the Winter Show, but sometimes it kind of offsets slightly, so we have that this year. We're happy to have a weekend where we can all be here together at the same time. And there are a few exhibitions of drawings in the Winter Show, so we hope that you will see those, but of course, we also hope that you'll go see all the exhibitions as part of Master Drawings New York. There are some brochures in the back. When you walk in, there's some on the side table there. So please do have a look and visit everyone. There's 26 dealer exhibitions up until February 3rd. Yeah. So, and to tell you a little bit more about the Drawing Foundation, we are a nonprofit dedicated to the study and scholarship of drawings. We do classes. We organize events. We celebrate exhibitions that are coming up and highlight those. We are a place for curators, conservators, enthusiasts, practitioners, all of those people related to drawings to come together and really learn more about what's happening related to drawings around the world, but really centered in New York City at this point. So we're hoping to expand that. And I'd like to introduce our moderator today. She's a longtime friend who I have known as the director of Stephen Ongpin Fine Art, but she has many hats like most of us do in the art world. She is also the head of business development from ArtTactic, which is a London-based art research firm, and she has prepared a special report today on drawings, the market of drawings. That will be the basis for the conversation, but just the starting point. They're going to talk about lots of things beyond that. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Meg.
Thank you, Allison. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming today. As Allison said, I am here representing ArtTactic, which I'm sure many of you have not heard of. In the old masters world, data is, not something that we're always a huge fan of, but it's always something interesting, a different point of view on the market. So the special report that Allison mentioned, everybody here will get a free copy. So after the talk today, you will get an email with that report, trying to be eco-friendly. Everything is digital now. So we will be sharing some interesting bits throughout the panel, but you will be able to read it for yourself. So to introduce the panelists, Jill Newhouse of Jill Newhouse Gallery, specializing in 19th and 20th century European and American art. And Emily Peters is with us, curator of prints and drawings, the Cleveland Museum of Art, and is also a specialist of Northern Renaissance art. And we have Christopher Bishop of Christopher Bishop Fine Art, specializing in old master drawings, but also the president of Master Drawings New York. Very sadly, our fourth panelist, Michael Rubenstein, was not feeling well this morning, so he wasn't able to join us today. He was going to be our collector voice, but sadly, you're just stuck with us. So to kick things off, the drawings world, as Allison said, I do also work at a gallery that specializes in drawings. We're a very close-knit community, but to a lot of the art market, we can be a little bit niche. So I always like to start these panels off by asking everybody, how and why did you enter the field of drawings? Jill, because you're next to me. Sorry, got the hot seat.
I started my business in 1980, and in 1980 it was really a moment when drawings were appearing on the international art market. There was the Chatsworth sale in London, where Raphael drawing brought a world record prize. George Goldner came to the Getty Museum and he started to buy things in an aggressive way, so a Rembrandt drawing was suddenly in the news. And there was no one really in the States or in New York specializing in drawings. There were book dealers whose inventory overlapped with drawings, but no one really doing that. So that was my choice. It was also at that time an area that I could afford to buy inventory, and it was just a great place to start because it was new. And then the 80s, of course, was a great moment to be starting any kind of business. So everything really took off. I have to say, too, that I wanted to be a painter when I was young, and I always specialized in drawings, and that was a medium that I understood deeply and understood the choices of charcoal or graphite, so I could relate to actual objects, which is very important as well.
Emily?
Good afternoon, everyone, for having me today. I came to drawings through an academic path. I was a graduate student, and the questions that I am most interested in and have always been most interested in have been about process, making, and about the way that different networks in the early modern period were connected, and drawings were kind of the perfect medium to explore some of those questions. So drawings for me have always been about understanding more about artistic practice and networks. And I spent a lovely 12 months in the Low Countries looking at drawings collections. And I see them also very tied into prints. So I'm a print person and a drawing person. And of course, then one becomes a professional and needs to work with the collection that you're given. And I've worked in two very different collections, and I'd probably talk a little bit more about that. I worked at the Museum of Art at the Rhode Island School of Design for 11 years, which is a teaching museum and a wonderful collection that was founded in the late 19th century. And now I'm at a large civic museum, the Cleveland Museum of Art, and they're two very different entities in the way that collecting and we approach drawings is very different in the two. So that is my beginning story.
When I was in graduate school at Yale, I worked for a couple of dealers, and I began to go out and try to buy for myself as a runner, as somebody who went to small auctions to find objects. And I really thought I would deal in American furniture, American paintings, and possibly American drawings. It was really what was hot at the time. We're sort of talking sort of around 2000, 2002, 2003. I would go to various auctions chasing Hudson River school paintings, looking at highboys for other dealers. And what I found was that the market was very tight, that often we would get beat out on the phone from New York or from Florida. And what I had studied at Yale was really 17th and 18th century French and Italian paintings, drawings, and sculptures. And I found eventually that the thing that had opportunities in it at these auctions, whether they be in Maine or in Illinois or in Florida, were often old master drawings where you had to be there to look at the paper to understand that it was a live drawing and not a print or not somehow a copy or in bad condition. And so I began to buy these things and try to find dealers and auction houses in New York who would buy them. So it's a different path than I thought I would take, but it really was where the opportunity was. It was really the place where you got rewarded for spending time in the library and thinking about things very closely. And that's how I really became a drawings dealer.
So based on everybody's answers, it's interesting, kind of we have two dealers and museums, but at the heart of it, I feel like particularly in the drawings world, it's born out of interest. But, Jill and Chris in particular, you also talked about market opportunity. That was one of the things that into the world. And Well, yeah, for the next question, Emily, you're going to have to enlighten all of us. We were talking just before on what you keep in mind when adding to your collection. So a very different perspective as a dealer, what you might be looking for if you're looking for something to sell or if you're looking on behalf of your collectors. But yeah, Emily, this is new for me as well in terms of what you're looking for adding to a museum collection. So we'll let Jill take a break and I'll put you in the hot first.
Okay. Great. Well, we have to cover a lot of ground as museum curators in a department of prints, usually prints and drawings. And, obviously we have a standing collection, but more and more these days, we are really thinking about, we want a visually stunning object that will engage our audiences. We want a historically important object, but we are also very much thinking about exhibiting those works. And so we want to think about the context in which we can show them and the stories that we can tell with them. And I think that that's become more prominent recently, lately, and something that I'm very invested in as well. So the questions we might ask are, first of all, how soon can we get it out? I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question when we acquire something, because these are works that are generally in storage, that are we bring out in our special galleries or special exhibitions. So we're thinking about, can we show it just in the drawings galleries, or can we also show it with our permanent collections in our British galleries? Can we show it with some decorative arts objects as well? So we're actually thinking about the entire museum collection often, at least in the case of the CMA. I can't speak for every institution, of course. And so it's really driving that narrative is the narratives, which also creates competition in the market, I will say, because a lot of museums are trying to, of course, showcase artists who haven't traditionally been showcased, such as women in the early modern period. That's one story. So then we get a lot of museums looking at works of art by women from the early modern period, and it really so that story-driven kind of collecting really creates a lot of some competition in the market as well. That's one piece of how we do it. I think the other piece is to think that we are also sometimes sharing our acquisition funds, and I can talk more about that with other departments in museums. So we have to come with very, very strong arguments for what we want to add and why. So I don't consider what we're doing, we're not so much doing gap filling. Maybe that was in the past a way to say, well, we don't have a work by this artist, let's add it. It's really not what we're doing anymore in the case of my institution. We're thinking a bit broader now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think that I see a lot of same trends from the other side of the coin, so to speak, and I think that you find that people are more and more interested in stories and being able to connect to the maker of an object, being able to connect to the physical story of the drawing, the history of the drawing, the physicality of the drawing, and I think that's a reflection both of sort of advances in scholarship and a change in the way in which people talk about drawing and process. And I think people really want to be engaged in that way. I have a Spanish drawing up in the gallery right now that I would say has sort of, monopolized 70% of the discussions I have in the gallery for the opening night, and it's because it's pricked for embroidery. It's very visual, it's very tactile. You can go and see exactly, and then it leads to any number of questions about why and how and when, and then it becomes very personal and it becomes something people can engage with. And I think that's what people want. They want to be led down into a story.
Jill, have you found the same thing?
I do think that's true. And I do think that there is an aspect of being a detective in the drawing market. Certainly in old master drawings, you can buy something that's anonymous and attribute it by looking through paintings, matching it up. But I wanted to say that one thing that's really changed for the better is that the collecting drawings in Europe, even up to the 1980s, the drawings were all kept in boxes. You would be a professor, you would be a scholar, you would go to Kolnagi's, let's say, or one of the few drawing dealers, and you would go through the boxes. And the idea of exhibiting drawings or putting them on public view was not a popular one, because of the fragility and because drawings can't be hung in light. But now we have much more knowledge about how to house them. There's all these museum glass so that collectors can put drawings up in their homes. And I think it really broadened the audience. I think that there is this detective aspect to drawings, but I also find that young collectors who are coming to the gallery are responding to the image and to the personal connection it gives you to the artist. So, for example, if we have a we art or one art drawing, the young collectors that look at it see contemporary art in it, and they see the connection between the old masters and art that's happening now. And I think in that way, drawings are a wonderful area to connect the old with the new. And that's always what attracted me to it. So I think that's a change too.
So when you guys are looking at works, either for acquisition for the museum or for something for an exhibition, well, everybody just talked a lot about the story and the image, which is very much individual to each piece of art. But Emily, you did touch on it very briefly in terms of larger market trends, things that are a bit popular, one thing being the market for women artists. So is that something, well, not just, the market for women artists, but certain market trends, prices, sentiment, all of those things. Is that something that you guys try to keep in mind when you're acquiring things or looking for collectors, or is that not necessarily, not that it's not on your radar, but do you feel that first and foremost it's about the individual artwork? So basically, how does the market play into your decisions?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say. I mean, there's certain things that, as a dealer, definitely I've sort of taught myself more about northern drawings since I started, and you find that that's a very specific market. You have a very specific type of collector who's very passionate, who tend to be very narrowly focused on certain periods or certain things or certain images, and there are shifts in taste and style, the 17th century French stuff, which I love and is one of my sort of areas of study, has sort of taken over in some ways from the 18th century French material. So I think that there is a reality, which is that you can't order up drawings, you're sort of subject to what's out there. But I'm particularly excited when I find things that are Spanish or odd and Flemish, offense to any Flemings in the room. But I think that, that there are certain things that you want to look for, which beyond the image, which is people like the quirky, the odd, they like inscriptions, they like stories, they like context. So I think there are things, but yet you are subject to what exists and what has survived, for sure.
Emily, how does that impact you guys at the museum in terms of acquisition?
Well, like I touched upon, it makes it harder to acquire them. A lot of museums have been in the last 10+ years more and more priced out of the top end of the market, and I think that some wealthy private collectors are paying prices that we couldn't have imagined 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so it does make it very difficult for museums to compete at that higher level in the more competitive areas, especially with drawings where there's relatively a smaller inventory out there. But that's why we love working with dealers so much, because going to auction is always going to be cause some trepidation. I had recently, we recently bid on something at auction, and this is a typical story. It was a work that, what we have to do at museums is we have to justify the price that we're going to pay. And that's a very different process from a private collector who needs to justify it to oneself, right? But museums need to justify the price to a board. And so if you can't find any kind of what we call comparables for that object, then you have to find like objects. And in the case of this drawing, I was looking back about 30 years for the most comparable object. And then I had to do my own market analysis and kind of say, based on the way that the market has expanded for this particular artist in the last 30 years, I think we need to be prepared to pay about tenfold of what was paid back in the 90s. And to then come up with a price and agree upon the price with my committee, and then that is the price we pay at auction. And we don't have any wiggle room in the auction room, maybe one or two increments at the most. So it does, it's very hard for us to compete with that competitive lots at the high end of the market. And the end of that story is we were the underbidder. So, and that's not the only time that's happened. So what that means is we're essentially bidding against one other person, go higher. So it makes it difficult, but that's why we love working with dealers, and the close relationships with dealers and collectors are incredibly important. We hope that obviously some of those works will eventually come back to us through our relationships with collectors. And the dealers help us to cover the ground. To be honest, we used to have, at the CMA in the 1980s, we had 4 curators of prints and drawings. Today we have 2. So we can't possibly cover, and as I'm sure Jill and will mention, the auctions have kind of expanded all over Europe now, right? So there's no way we can possibly cover all of that ground. And so the dealers have to provide not only the inventory to us, but there's this, to go the extra mile to then do that research to find the context of the object, to see it as a worthy object, and then to present it, do that work with the provenance, which is very important to institutions, and do that work with the context with institutions in mind. And that was a long answer to the question, but
it's absolutely
went into some other territory there, as always happens.
Well, Jill, did you have anything to add?
We also have to remember that there's so much more available to be seen online in terms of shopping. So I don't know about, I'm sure all of you are on Instagram, you can be buying art all day long. So there's just a lot more research, a lot more work to do. But speaking for myself, we love selling things to museums, being very aware that we're the intermediary step that can do the research, find the object, do the research, clear the provenance, make an assessment of value, and then present it to the museum. And I think that's a really valuable relationship because, of course, then the fact that Cleveland Museum bought something from us is a feather in our cap too. So it's the same with collectors and galleries too. So I think it's a relationship that includes all of us.
Well, looking at the market, there's 2 sides to the market, as everybody here is well aware. There's the auction data that is publicly available, but then, of course, what happens in museums and at galleries, that is not published. So looking at market data, it's always a push and pull. You want the full context of, what everybody knows versus what everybody doesn't, but also perception is a large part of market auctions. So, what I wanted to ask everybody, but for those of you who have not yet had a chance to report, I was going to give a few tidbits from it. But basically, what I always find fascinating is, do the numbers, or at least, the public auction numbers, do they match what everybody is feeling market when you're out on the ground, when you're in the auction room? Do they match up? So just a few points that have come out of the report. So overall, the global auction market for the major categories was down roughly 27% in 2023. So that's Old Master, Impressionist and Modern.
Gross sales.
Yeah.
And gross.
Old Master, Impressionist and Modern, and Postmodern Contemporary. However, the lower end of the market, being below $50,000, actually jumped by 8% in terms of the value that it brought in gross sales, and 18% by the volume of lots sold. For drawings. But then in the drawings market specifically, the total sales value for 2023 was up 15% over 2022. So, overall, people are a bit doom and gloom, but actually, if you look at the number for the drawings market, we were up 15% year over year, and the number of lots sold was actually up 19% year over year, which again is just a very interesting stat. But one thing to note is that the average price of drawings, it dropped ever so slightly, about 3%, but, negligible. And then even though sometimes in January we will get reporters coming out, and it happens almost every year, the old masters market is dead, yet here we are. One thing that is really interesting, particularly in the drawings market, if you look at our market over the last 10 years, it is the most stable market in the industry across the drawings market. So it is essentially a straight line over the last 10 years, whereas a lot of the other categories, there's huge peaks, huge troughs, so you don't really know what you're going to get year on year. But the Old Masters Drawings world, like I said, we're a very consistent and close-knit community. But all of that being said, does that match up to what you guys are experiencing on the ground?
Well, we were chatting before, and I during the pandemic, because I had extra time on my hands, I actually sat down and tried to apply some of these analytics to my own business, and laughing, and actually I think that running a small gallery, as Chris and I do, is really more an accumulation of events that try to see patterns in. Because as we touched on before, if I have a client who comes to me and says, I would like to buy 10 Delacroix drawings, that's great, but I can't automatically find 10 Delacroix drawings. We are very much reaction to what comes on the market. So that's the first plus. And secondly, sales are come out of the gallery, they come out of art fairs. There's a consistency to my business. Obviously, I've been in business since 1980, but I think it's very difficult. And also, when I'm always looking for something unusual, something new, we always find new clients who cast a different eye on things. Sometimes I sell something that I've had in the gallery for 10 years. Sometimes I have something for 10 days. It's a wonderful business, particularly because of that. You never know what you're going to see at the dealers. And also, it's so interesting. Something that was not interesting to you as a collector or as a museum 4 years ago, you could look at it now and say, oh yes, I see that. I see it differently. And that's the wonderful thing about art. So, I'm a data rebel.
Hey, that's totally fair. Well, but that's, always finding the numbers really interesting, and, they're important. There's a place for them. But at the end of the day, there is the public market and the private market. So you can't have one without the other. It's not.
And also, these are not objective. The assessment of the quality of an object is objective. 50% of that is objective. Then there's the personal aspect of taste that changes from person to person, which is a great thing about art.
I think that it's possible that the numbers are reflecting partly a way in which the buying of drawings has changed. There are many more people bidding at home. There are many more people not in the auction room, sort of bidding against each other in person. And I think that has changed, particularly at the mid and lower level of drawings. And I think it's great. It's expanded the market. So I would concur that makes sense to me. That certain tranche of the drawings market has expanded and has remained stable because during the pandemic, people learned how to bid, started looking at catalogs online in a way that they weren't doing before. That being said, I think I learned a tremendous amount in the auction room, in the sense that you see who's bidding, you see maybe why they're bidding, you see the results, you sort of see which dealers are bidding on what, even you get to know all the underbidders, you see who likes what kind of thing. And I wonder if that's going to get lost now that there are fewer people in the room, so to speak.
I think it was already getting lost because you were less aware people were bidding on drawings, people were hiding. I think, having said that, I do think there's more transparency in the gallery world, whereas for Stephen, I'm sure you do too, we include where we purchase something, how much we paid for it. It's all very transparent. So in that sense, some of it's gone underground and some of it's come to the fore.
Highly recommend going to an auction and just watching. It's sit in the back of the room or stand in the back of, yeah. We do that all the time.
Well, so Emily, has that, I know in terms of, you said you have to justify your prices, has the transparency been helpful, or actually do you feel like because there's so much more available online, probably like you said, so many more people involved, and it's become that much more international, has that made your lives harder or easier when trying to acquire for a public collection?
I think it's been just recognized in the field that it's a very important way to do business. And I would say that because the field is very small, we do tend to all know one another. And I think that, we really, trust is a huge, important part of the business. So any dealer working with an institution knows they're going to be asked those questions, what's the provenance of the object? And I think that it's finally, it's finally a question that is not uncomfortable to ask. And I celebrate that. I think we obviously all need to go in that direction. Yeah.
If I could just ask Emily a sort of follow-up question, which I'm just sort of curious about, which is, sometimes, I wonder, from a curator's point of view, if you run up against a situation where the comparables don't exist, particularly in the case of women artists who maybe were not represented in the market a lot, do you find sometimes that these things conflict, right? The idea that you need to find unique objects by underrepresented artists, and then trying to find comparables for those artists who may not have the scholarly record or the publication record of their male peers, to use the example of females, historically female artists.
So your question is about price or about?
How do you tend to think of that potential conflict between finding things that are rare and underrepresented, and the need to still have comparables for things that maybe were not market historically?
Well, in that case, I'll tell you what we do. We find comparable artists. You see what I mean? So we don't have to use that specific artist's work as an example if it was a discovery of some kind. So we kind of look more broadly into the field. And I think almost any of those, if it's an early modern female artist, one can easily justify a lot of the prices that are being asked, and that's how we try to do it. I think that's kind of our standard.
Sense.
Yeah. I was just going to respond to Megan too with
I don't have as much to say about the averages or the markets in terms of that, but it doesn't really. I mean, the report was very interesting to read, and I learned a lot reading the report. There's always, of course, these exceptions to the rule, especially at the higher end of the market, that kind of make the averages, I guess, a little bit misleading because, I think that if you cross a river that's on average 4 feet, you're going to get swept away when it's 10 feet, right? So that's usually what happens at the higher end of the market. But I think there are a lot of opportunities for institutions wanting to and collectors wanting to buy at the low end and at the middle. And it takes a lot more work, I think, to do that to the works that haven't been published, the works that might have some condition issues that you would want to consider. And if you're willing to jump in there, then there's a lot of opportunity. That's where it is.
Well, so you actually just kind of went into the next question as well. But yeah, the subtitle of our talk is How to Collect. So we've talked a lot about, what we think about, what we look at, but, if you had a piece of advice for people who were potentially looking to get into the drawings market, or even people who are already in it, but things that you learned as of late.
Well, I would say the first rule is to look at as many objects as you can in museums and to take advantage of all the wonderful galleries and the people like Chris and myself who are more than happy to discuss the pros and cons of any object that you like, and in terms of the market or the quality for that particular artist. So really just looking and trusting your instinct. I need trust we can discuss the situation with my advice.
I would say, go talk to the dealers, and we love questions. We love when people come in and they want to see things out of the frame. They have questions about the history of paper. They have questions about condition. We love all those kinds of questions because we love to have those conversations because generally speaking, it's your third or fourth conversation that might actually lead to something, in terms of determining what the client might want or a sale. And I think that that is probably my first point. I would, advise, go talk to the dealers and don't be shy or intimidated by the process or what have you. It's, they're there to sort of serve you and answer questions and show you things. And start young too, sort of, I love it when we have people in the gallery who are in college or in graduate school, and they may not start collecting for 10 or 15 years, or they may start small, but it's always worth going and looking and seeing because that's how you learn.
Well, Emily, actually, you probably have a different perspective on this slightly, just, whereas Jill and Chris are in the business of selling inherently, well, myself as well, but you had mentioned, developing relationships with the dealers, but also with collectors, and, maybe one day those things will end up back in the collection.
Yeah, right. I think in the drawings world, it's an especially rewarding, mutually beneficial relationship, the collector and the curator or dealer, because, obviously with drawings, there is an expertise that is very useful. There's questions of authorship. There's these connoisseurship questions. And, what I would encourage someone who's interested in drawings is to seek that kind of relationship. I mean, museums have all kinds of groups you can get involved with. You can approach curators. You really can. And especially if you're interested in drawings and that person's a drawings curator, that is absolutely something you can do. And I think that those are really mutually beneficial relationships because you can get advice, and eventually you could leave your works as a legacy to the institution. So it's something that curators, we spend a lot of time doing that and talking to people about works of art that they're interested in, and we get questions like, would this be the kind of work of art that could eventually be in the collection? And we answer them honestly. And I think that those are, they shouldn't be scary conversations to have. And I think that that's what really makes the field special in a way. As you know, I mean, you might know in many institutions here in New York, there are wonderful collectors who are tied in with the institutions whose collections have been promised to the institutions, and those are specifically drawings collectors. They're really, it's a special, special field. We would like more of those in Cleveland. So we do not have a lot of old master collectors in Cleveland, but what we are doing and thinking about is more of a national, international network, and we've put into process some programs to acquaint people outside of Cleveland as well as within Cleveland with what we have in the collection, because it really is one of the great collections in the United States. And I encourage you all to come. It took me about 50 minutes on a plane to get here today. So yeah, it's really, I feel with drawings, you don't want to go it alone, and you don't have to go it alone. So.
I'm sorry, I have to add one thing that was left out. The buying, you have to buy things that you love and that you want to live. That's the most important thing, and it enriches your life by owning them and by living with them.
So for those of you in the back that couldn't hear, is that the most important thing when it comes to buying is buying things that you absolutely love and that you want to live with at the end of the day. Well, I think that's a good place so for the final question, it's a bit of a two-sided coin, but going forward, obviously there's been a lot of change in not just the drawings market, but in the overall art market in the last few years post-COVID. As we've said, things are more international, they're more transparent, they're more online, partially out of necessity, but now it's definitely here to stay. So what would you say are the biggest opportunities that you see, going into this year? Or, what are actually the biggest obstacles? Well, makes you excited? What makes you a little bit apprehensive about 2020? Both sides.
I would say that I'm excited and gratified by how many people have come around to the events and to Master Drawings. I mean, we're only open last night, but I'm looking forward to sort of more of that, more normalcy, more people coming back to New York. That's definitely what I would like to see. And of course, there are always things that that can throw a wrench into the market, and we've seen, unfortunately, a number of those things recently. But I'm optimistic that we are going to see more and more interest. I love to see the tourists back in New York. I love the idea that the streets are full. To me, that's very optimistic.
Emily.
Well, I wanted to say that over the last 2 or 3 years, I think that over 50% of our clients are new to the gallery. And I think as much as the world is in this really strange moment that's obviously changing quite a lot, that's a bit of a reflection of that. But I think that people need the intellectual piece, the gratification of art, and it's very grounding. I think that there's going to be a lot of changes going forward in the way we all do business, and in small galleries like Chris's and like myself, how we develop. It's going to be very interesting to watch. But we do have lots of new people, and the great thing about the drawings market is that you can collect across periods. So, and we do see people like that are buying the object that they love. Like a museum, it was really only a museum that could do that, because originally people collected American art or French art and stayed in that particular period. So works on paper gives you the freedom to collect across centuries. And that in a way is indicative of the type of thinking that I think moves us all, to be able to see patterns in the world. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic in.
I'm very optimistic because there continue to be wonderful museum exhibitions of drawings, and I think that that's really, really important to driving interest toward the drawings field. We've seen great exhibitions in New York in the last year, also in Cleveland of French drawings, and I think that we've had symposia, we've had things like master drawings, but also scholarly symposia with scholars, young scholars looking at drawings all over Europe, coming to Cleveland to present research, and I was very encouraged by that. So I think we're still going, and there will always be interest in drawings. There will absolutely always be interest in drawings, and I think we just might need to think about how to present drawings to our audiences to draw them in new ways, and that's what we're trying to do.
I have to say, it's actually really refreshing to be in a room of extremely optimistic people. Given the geopolitical landscape, we're all coming out of COVID. Things were.
You did shape the question that way.
I did, yeah.
You could ask it the other way too.
Leading question. Well, okay, we'll end that on a positive note because I'm feeling very glowy now. So. But I think that's a good time to open up the floor if anybody has any questions.
I have a question for Evan. I have a question. I wondered, from an institutional point of view, if there might be in the future a point that certain big-name artists become too expensive to create big exhibitions. If there's a chance that there will be big shows and big names mainly based on drawings, because they will be more affordable to transport and to show.
Do you need me to repeat the question, just in case anybody...
So your question was, do you think drawings will be more affordable for transport than other...
If there's a chance that some big-name artists will have exhibitions mainly based on paper instead of paintings, because paintings will be too expensive.
I suppose so. I mean, we are actually opening an exhibition in Cleveland in the fall, which was at the Royal Academy, called Picasso on Paper. So it's an all Picasso paper show. I do think there's lots of opportunities for showing artists, big name artists, through the lens of paper, and it is a less expensive way to transport art. So it's a good point. Let's think about that. I think that at institutions, of course, we are still asked to produce things that will bring in audiences all the time. That's kind of the how are you going to bring in audiences? I'm very lucky to work in an institution where we are also able to do more scholarly or traditionally academic types of shows, as long as we pepper them in with the audience generating shows. So it's a good question. I think it's a possibility. Yeah.
I have, if I may, two questions. The first is professionally. Could you characterize the drawings that you have either been selling or collecting? And the second question is, what drawings have you individually and privately, if at all, been collecting?
So for anybody who didn't hear, it's what drawings from a professional level have you been buying and selling in terms of, well, category, genre, however people like to identify that, versus personally?
Well, the gallery specializes in French art from 1820 to 50, so we've been selling within those parameters because that's where the inventory is. Delacroix, Géricault, Redon, Nord. And that's where our audience is, which is not to say that we don't get things outside that field, but the bulk of our...
Does that differ from anything you might collect personally, or?
I don't aggressively collect personally, so it's really relevant to the gallery.
Well, as I mentioned, we collect all over the spectrum, and my colleague and I, for the institution, a great acquisition of the last year was we do buy pastels. Those are considered, or pastels, however we want to say that. Those are considered works on paper in our department, and I was thrilled to bring in a pastel by the Irish artist Hugh Douglas Hamilton of the Earl Cooper, and with his hunting dog, which is just a charming, charming work. And I did bring that in with an eye to putting it on view in our British galleries next to some oil paintings, because I thought it was a wonderful comparison of the surface and the way that pastel kind of reads and acts differently than oil paint for our audiences. So that's just an example of something we bought to go on view. Of course, we can't leave it on view forever because of its fragility. So that's just one example. I generally collect some contemporary prints because I was affiliated with RISD for so long. I have some wonderful associations with the printmakers at RISD.
I would say in general that I've expanded my net sort of over time and learned about new fields. And I really started as the 17th century and 18th century French and Italian, as I said. But then you find something really interesting that's a 19th century drawing, you find something very interesting that's a German drawing, and it leads you down a path, and then you know more. And I think that that's a really sort of healthy process for the dealer, that they're continually learning, and it's really why it remains fascinating. And I think that that's sort of a healthy trend to say the great things you find in a private collection, even if you don't know about them right away, you should trust your instinct and go find out what that thing is, because it's going to, even if you don't buy it, even if you don't make a transaction with that drawing, you'll learn something that then 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, you'll see something at auction, or you'll see something in another collection, and it'll trigger something in your memory about what you looked at or what book you looked at, what have you. As far as collecting, I really try not to. I collect books and auction catalogs. Not to collect art, but I do collect sort of books and auction catalogs. You don't want to be sort of competition for your clients in the literal sense, yeah.
Well, I've heard of, as Allison mentioned, I do also work at a gallery, Stephen Ongpin Fine Art, and I've always appreciated his stance, which was he does not sell anything he wouldn't personally hang in his home. So it's it's also his version of collecting, and we all actually get really sad sometimes. Things find nice new homes.
Jill, did I hear you correctly that...
I can't hear you.
Did I hear you correctly, Jill, that you're transparent about what you have in the piece, in other words, monetarily? I've never heard that from another dealer, so...
Well, we certainly, yes, somebody asked us what we paid for an object and to explain why we're selling it for more than we paid. Yeah, I'm happy to discuss that. It's sometimes not as relevant as you think. It's more this idea of, particularly for people who are just starting to collect, you just want to know that it's like when you buy a pair of expensive boots. You want to know that you're getting the best possible price, so you wait till they go on sale, or you want to know that the markup is based on something other than sheer profit making. Having said that, we're in business, so and in a lot of cases it sounds like the profit is more than it is, because that profit goes into buying inventory and doing art fairs and being in public, and it's a normal process. So I think it's a fair question. I don't think galleries would always answer it, because it is private information also if I bought something privately, but we try and provide as much
If I actually, Phil, if you don't,
Yes.
adding to that, I think more and more because of resources that are out there, ArtNet, ArtPrice, it is just much more readily available information. There are a lot of dealers buying from auction, whereas, back in the 80s, a lot of things were done, or more things were done privately, so that information was really not available. And I think from a dealer's perspective, it is always better that a collector, if that question gets asked, they find out from us as opposed to just then going on ArtNet and searching for it. So, I think it's one of the great things about transparency. But yeah, sometimes, as Jill said, it's not always relevant based on the value that's brought in other ways.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. Circumstances change. Maybe I've owned that object for 5 years. And 5 years ago, it wasn't worth what it is now. Sometimes it's the reverse. The price is actually going down. So it's a fair question to ask, but like all of this information should be placed in the right context. And the most important thing is you should be talking to people who are willing to talk to you about it, honestly.
Thank you. All right, so now here are my questions. So my first question is, people have always said to me, oil paintings are great. If you want a real personal insight into an artist, look at their drawings. I'd like to know from you, what's special about drawings? Is there a window into the artist's creation that you think they provide, or maybe it's not the case? Maybe it's just like an oil or a watercolor, anything. And then the second question is, what do you think constitutes an exemplary drawings collection? Are there certain qualities, certain parameters? What makes a great collection of drawings in particular?
Those are interesting questions. I mean, I think that one of the things that's really interesting about drawings is the scale. I mean, it's something you can hold. It's something you can sort of have a real relationship with, which happens with painting sometimes too. But I think people forget the sort of the handling and the looking at it in different lights and the sort of facility that the drawing brings to that. That you might have a drawing up on a wall at different times of day. It looks different, or it looks different in different light, different rooms. And I think there's a real relationship that develops that way. Not that that can't happen with paintings, but I think it's harder because of the physical part of it and also the scale of some paintings. An exemplary sort of drawings collection, I think it's a tough question. I would say that when you really go into a collection and you see the passion, you see somebody or a couple that have put something together that they really love and that they've built together, and it has a sort of life to it. I mean, that's really how I would define it. When the collection has a personality, when it's almost a human, that's what I would sort of aim for. Although that's a difficult sort of thing to aim for, but that's what I that's what I look for, recognize as something truly special.
The question about paintings and drawings is an interesting one because, of course, and what Emily said about hanging the pastel in the painting galleries, of course, artists made drawings and paintings at the same time. So it's often people's personal response to drawings that leads them to collect them. It's a different, the objects are different in the space you live in. So it has to be a personal choice. From a museum point of view, there are different departments to answer each, but I often think it's interesting to put objects in different mediums together because that's how they were made.
You made the comment about trust, finding dealers you trust. And of course, we're all looking for that. So in your mind, what are the markers, trustworthy dealers and people in the business?
Yeah, it's easier than you think, really. A lot of the best dealers are parts of these types of organizations. They're kind of, there's a kind of internal vetting that takes place in that sense. They're involved with Master Drawings New York. They're involved with the various fairs, and if you see dealers working with institutions, they're going to be a trustworthy dealer, because there's a lot of any dealer who, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but who works with an institution is looking towards a long-term relationship. So there's no upside for them to be untransparent or untruthful. And so, it's easy to find out where things were bought by institutions, for example. But yeah, it's a close-knit community. So the Master Drawings New York is a good place to start, and then ask the questions and make sure the answers you get are satisfactory to you.
Yeah, I think there's a certain logic to it, the same way if I went to buy a car, which I know nothing about, you use your instinct, you ask for advice, and also all of these stories in the news about Knoedlers and about the Leonardo and Replopp and Bouvier, sounds like quite a character. They make great stories, but that's not the norm, really. So I think most people in this audience, if you trust your instinct, you can he's not telling you the truth. Having said that too, we all make mistakes, not mistakes that are, let's say you buy an object and it turns out through additional expertise to not be authentic. Let's say that's you have recourse. You can go back to the auction house and say, look, new information come to light and this is not right. So, and in every collection, there are going to be things that you wish you hadn't bought, or that you grow out of, that you move to a different wall and decide it doesn't look right anymore. So it's like I always say to people, art history and art purchasing is a moving vehicle. It's going to evolve. And
I would agree with that. I mean, you want to look for somebody who's going to stand behind what they're selling, and if you come back with a conservation issue where you want a new frame, you want a different mat, they should be willing to help you. I mean, I think that goes without saying, and you really want somebody who's going to stand behind the thing.
Cleveland has always been known as a museum of masterpieces. Always. Everything they bought was a masterpiece. What happens in this day and age? You have to start buying works by temporary artists. That, I think I can end the question.
No comment. Oh, it is a wonderful collection. It goes back to our director, whose name might be familiar to you, Sherman Lee, and his focus on quality. I mean, it really goes further back than that as well, to the founders of the institution. Our contemporary art program has been a very nice and wonderful addition, and it does help, bring different audiences in, and it doesn't mean that they don't also go see the other works of art in the institution. It's a free museum, so you can come and see whatever you want when you come. And I think it's not a huge collection of contemporary art. That's not all we buy by any means.
But for old masters, well, they're only a master.
We do try, yes.
I think we have a question.
What is your advice about developing our taste as collectors beyond visiting museums, dealers, and fairs? What else should we be doing?
So just to clarify the question, do you mean like just your taste, or as everyone says, kind of develop your eye, so a discerning eye in looking at quality and understanding value?
Okay.
I would say that I would put in a plug for two things. One is sort of arts education, and sort of in the universities to have really great professors who give really good lectures. And in some ways, there's also no substitute for travel. If you want to understand European art in particular, it's one of the best ways to really go and absorb things. I would say also that it's very useful to go to auctions, smaller auctions, where there's a lot of variety of quality, authenticity condition where you can see things that are not masterpiece after masterpiece. So if you go to the Met, you'll see the highlights of, the whole tradition. But if you go to smaller auctions, you'll get used to seeing things of varying quality, and you can kind of tune your eye. And I think even dealers have to do this. They have to go tune their eyes by seeing more and more stuff. And it's useful to see copies. It's useful to see forgeries. It's useful to see drawings in poor condition. It's useful to see drawings that have been light struck, because you learn the difference.
I would say follow your own personal taste also. So if you really, really love an Andy Warhol of a Campbell soup can, don't talk yourself into buying a Tintoretto drawing. So
and vice versa.
If you're collecting, and vice versa if you're collecting.
I would say join an affinity group at a museum if you can, where there's like-minded people. There's often, works on paper focused affinity groups. We have the Storied Print Club of Cleveland in Cleveland, and people they get access to the curators once or twice a month, and to the other collectors. I think that's also a really fun thing to do. I had some other idea, but I've forgotten what it was. That was it.
I will come at it from a slightly different angle. So, like we said, it's developing your taste and being able to see things in person and have access to it. But forgive me, I am the ArtTactic person here. But as Chris had said, sometimes sitting in the auctions or even just watching the auctions and having an eye on the market, it is very educational. So I will put in a plug. Sometimes you can't travel everywhere. You can't physically see all of the auctions. On our website, ArtTactic does have a game called Art Forecaster. And for a lot of the big sales that come up across genres, we'll present a piece of art with its estimate, give a little history about it in the cataloging, and then you get to guess where you think it is going to sell. And what's really fun about it is the system keeps, if you play consistently, or just more than once, it keeps track of how well you did, and also tells you anonymously, compared to the rest of the people who play, what other people think is going to happen, what actually happens. So I do have to say for myself personally, as someone who was educated in the old masters, in a gallery that focused more on the old masters, in my role at ArtTactic, it's been focusing on modern and contemporary a bit more. That has been hugely educational. So everybody play. Yes. Lori, you just get to feel good. It's a free platform if you win.
I was also going to say, go to the art study rooms that are available to you and say, I'm going to look at X today, a box of French drawings. Those are open to you. You make an appointment. There's a few in New York you can go to. Every museum has them, and we love to have visitors, so do that as well.
I see someone has a microphone in the back.
Okay, so you go by that Turner that's on the right of the picture back there. You pay whatever Lowell Lipson asks, and you bring it home in a bag. What do you put it in so that you can put it on the wall? Because, Jill, I think you mentioned museum glass. Is that actually good enough so that you can put it on the wall so it won't fade more?
There is what we call museum framing now that protects the artwork, but probably the person who sold you the Turner would tell you not to hang it in your dining room directly opposite the sunrise, because that's going to damage it. And there are some people who are real devotees of works on paper who will put a cover on the artwork when they're not home. It can be cumbersome, but you do have to be aware of the light, but we do have much better framing tools. When I first started, we didn't have, it sounds like the Dark Ages, but we didn't have non-reflective glass. So large works on paper were glazed with regular glass. If you stood in front of it, you basically looked at yourself. So that's really changed. They're really good scientific tools that a good framer can help you.
So you really would put that Turner on your wall? How long would you keep it there?
A museum would have stricter rules about that. I do believe that art is meant to live with, and I do think that inevitably there will be some changes, so I think as the custodian of a beautiful Turner like that, you would just do the best you can and try not to bring it any harm, and yes, absolutely live with it.
So I think we probably have time for one more question. Right here.
I had an observation. On your way to these wonderful print study rooms, do stop at the library. There are the Cleveland Museum, particularly, and all the institutions in New York are available to everyone, and the recess is unbelievable.
Well, so for those who didn't hear the beginning, it was a comment to add for how to educate yourself. On your way to the print rooms, make sure to stop by the museum libraries because they are incredible resources. Well, we can cheat and do one more question if there is one.
Just very quickly, for each of the panelists, if you had to pick one highlight work from across your careers, which you bought and wish you could have again, what would it be?
Great question to end on. Well done.
Have again in terms of the market value having changed, or just because we missed it so much that held it?
I would say that a brochure drawing that I sold once is now a gift, a promised gift to the Frick, and I was able to see it again on the wall for the first time in many years. And I sold it towards the beginning of my career, and I knew it was great. I didn't realize quite how great it was. I've learned more since, and I'd love to have it back, although I'm, of course, very proud to have it go to the Frick. Federico Barocci was an artist from Urbino. Yep. 16th century.
I think in terms of rare events, in the 90s I was given a collection called the Curtis Baer Collection of Old Master, early modern drawings. And there were such fabulous things there to sell, and as I don't specialize in old masters, it was very lucky that vetted, and there was a Fra Bartolomeo landscape drawing, which was a private collector, as well as a Titian ink drawing, and those are things I'll never again. So I could say that. Though we have, you never know because it's all about the next thing you're going to find, and there's always one. No regrets.
Emily, is there anything you've ever tried and missed, or?
Well, I've missed a lot of things, but oh my gosh, Megan, one of the things that I bought when I was at the RISD Museum was from Stephen Ongping Fine Art that I loved. It was a Guercino, and Guercino did different media. He did cut and ink, red chalk and black chalk, and he did ink wash. And that was my favorite, is my favorite.
Oh, I know exactly.
The ink wash drawing of the man, the kind of young man holding an owl. And it was just the weirdest, but the freshest and most compelling subject. And I'm so glad that that's at RISD because the technique of it was just astounding. So I miss that. I'm no longer there. Does that answer the question?
Well, I think just given the timing, that is where we will wrap it up for today. Thank you so much to Chris, Emily, and Jill for being up here with me, and to the Winter Show and the Drawings Foundation for having all of us. And like I mentioned in the beginning, everybody, as part of your registration, you will receive a free digital copy of the market review report. And with that, there is a discount to membership if you are interested. But yeah, thank you so much, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of their weekend.